My father's loud words echoed through the house, suggesting I belonged nowhere. The chandelier shook above his head, but he didn't even notice. My mother stood there with a calm, set face, arms folded, as if she had rehearsed this moment for a long time. I refused to show emotion. I secured my gray jacket, took my keys, and stepped outside into the rain. They believed they were getting rid of a disappointment. Actually, they had just cast out the person who secretly controlled their entire financial security. 3 weeks later, the family name, Sterling, was everywhere in the local news. The headlines ran right next to a picture I hadn't posed for. That evening, my phone began ringing without stopping. Outsiders always thought the Sterling family had no problems. Our large house up on Summit Ridge looked flawless, like something in a glossy magazine. It featured shining floors, imposing iron gates, and hedges cut with absolute precision. From the street, everything suggested success. Inside, though, there was a heavy silence. It was the kind of ringing quiet that happens when family members have stopped communicating entirely. Dinner followed the same routine nightly. My father occupied the main seat, focused on his phone, speaking to nobody. My mother would inquire about his business appointments, but she never mentioned me. I simply became invisible. As a child, I assumed that silence meant things were calm. Now I understood that it was a form of power. My father often made sure I knew my subordinate place. "Be thankful," he would lecture, slicing his meat with intense focus. "Few women get this chance to learn finance from their father." This wasn't a compliment. It was a clear reminder that he created this wealth, not me. He operated Sterling Group as if it were his own private domain. I was essentially just an employee who happened to share his last name. I returned from working hard in a major financial hub for years, eager to update the company operations. I secured new clients, brought in investors, and prepared a strategy to halt the company's decline. Yet, whenever I showed him a proposal, my father would give a slight smile and dismiss me. "That's sweet, Sylvie, but the men need to handle the serious transactions." My mother always kept quiet. She simply poured herself more wine. I sometimes questioned if she realized that my husband's business was decaying internally. It was riddled with poor partnerships, hidden liabilities, and questionable activities that were never discussed openly. I was aware of Bryce Sutton's involvement far earlier than she was. He was the associate who almost bankrupted our family years ago. The moment his name resurfaced, my gut feeling told me something terrible was coming. The night before everything completely collapsed, I heard my parents arguing in his study. My father's voice sounded sharp and my mother's was shaky. I managed to catch some phrases through the closed door. Sutton's mistake, not her fault. Then I heard my name, followed by laughter. The next morning, I received a warning to stay out of all family business. That evening, they called a formal family dinner. We sat at the same large table, experiencing the same crushing silence. This time, however, my father had paperwork prepared. "Sign this document," he instructed. "You need to transfer part of your personal investments to help the firm recover." I quickly reviewed the figures. This wasn't about recovery. It was an attempt to wipe me out. They wanted all of the assets I had built myself. When I refused, his gaze turned icy. My mother showed no reaction. "You have always been selfish, Sylvie," she stated softly, sounding like she was reading from a script. "You constantly think you are smarter than us." Perhaps I was. That was the last thing she said before he told me to vacate the house. People suggest that betrayal hurts most when delivered by strangers. They are wrong. It is significantly worse when it comes from the individuals who raised you to equate loyalty with affection. Standing outside the house, with rain soaking my hair, I made a quiet vow. If they wanted to eliminate me, I would demonstrate what genuine disappearance looked like. 3 days later, my mother texted me. It was only one line: "Do not return here." There was no regret, no feeling, just a pure order. It felt like being a child told to clean her bedroom. I stared at the screen until the brightness faded. For the first time in many years, I laughed. It wasn't amusement, but sheer disbelief. I suddenly understood that they weren't angry with me. They were scared. The question was, of what exactly? I rented a small, modern apartment downtown, made mostly of glass and silence. It was the type of place where the city lights made other people's lives seem like flickering, distant events. Kendall, my oldest friend, came over with takeout and tried to pull me back to reality. "You ought to sue them," she said, chewing on her noodles. "For what? Emotional stupidity." I smiled, but internally a sharp feeling of resentment twisted inside me. My parents had always treated me as replaceable, but this felt intentionally destructive. A week later, I drove past the Sterling family residence. I convinced myself I was seeking closure, needing one final look. But that was a lie. I wanted to see them to determine what my absence had caused. It was late, past midnight. The house seemed smaller in the dark. No music, no voices, just one light on in the living room. I parked across the street and waited patiently. At 12:17 a.m., a vehicle pulled up. It had black, tinted windows. A man stepped out. He was large-framed and wore an expensive coat. He was not my father. He moved with the clear self-assurance I recognized instantly, the kind born from wealth and potential danger. My mother opened the door immediately before he could even knock. She offered him a practiced, easy smile. It was not the expression of a woman filled with guilt. It belonged to someone who had already made her choice. They exchanged a few words. Then she reached out and touched his arm. This was deliberate, not accidental. It was a commitment. A cold sensation spread across my chest. All those years I had been labeled the issue, the disappointment, the difficult child. Yet here she was, entertaining the man who had previously betrayed my father's trust. I didn't bother taking pictures. I didn't need them. The image was perfectly imprinted in my mind. The next morning, I accessed my computer. I still had login credentials for Sterling Group's shared accounts and oversight files, perhaps due to carelessness or extreme arrogance on their part. Regardless, it was an open door. I reviewed the phone logs, travel itineraries, and expense reports. One number repeatedly appeared, always connecting after midnight. It belonged to the same person, Bryce Sutton. I leaned back, my heart beating fast but steady. The entire situation began to take shape, each piece darker than the last. My parents hadn't forced me out merely for financial reasons. They had done it because I was getting dangerously close to their secret. For the first time, it was not my father's reputation on the line. It was my mother's, and she had decided to sacrifice me to prevent my father from discovering the truth. I closed the lid of my laptop while the city hummed below. The truth wasn't merely unpleasant, it was active and growing. I decided to let it unfold naturally. I proceeded without haste. Rushing revenge out of anger causes mistakes. So, I waited. I allowed the truth to expand and solidify in the quiet until it started to choke them without my direct effort. The following week, I drove back to my old neighborhood. My father's car was absent, but the house still glowed, hiding something. Curtains were constantly drawn, and the lights stayed on too late. My mother's schedule had changed. Her car left the driveway at unusual times, sometimes returning near sunrise. Every night, Bryce Sutton's vehicle followed the exact same routine. Kendall called it an obsession. "You can't keep spying on them, Sylvie," she cautioned. "I am not watching," I corrected her. "I am confirming." Every evening, I noted every single change, who came, who left, the exact time the porch light turned off. This predictable routine revealed everything, where the lies were hidden and how much attention they required to survive. When I finally took action, it was understated. I started with a simple call to my father's assistant at the firm. I requested old partnership documents, claiming I needed them to help him restructure current debts. She paused, but still sent them over. Within the hour, I had evidence. Several shell accounts connected to Bryce's name, all funded by Sterling Group money, slowly draining the company. All of this happened while my father blamed me for poor investment decisions. It felt almost perfectly ironic. The man who founded his business on absolute control was losing everything incrementally, thanks to the very person he had once vowed to destroy. I finished compiling all the evidence. It included financial reports, travel summaries, and security footage from Bryce's regular hotel. The hotel desk manager didn't object when I asked for receipts under my mother's name, stamped with times. Money can buy silence, and I paid more. As I investigated further, every piece fit together. The company's sudden losses, her late-night absences, and why I had been suddenly removed. They didn't expel me to punish me. They erased me to protect her. When the file was ready, it seemed less like vengeance and more like a final conclusion. I printed everything. I slid the papers into a plain black envelope and sealed it calmly. On the front, I wrote just one word, truth. I sent it to my father. I didn't include a note or my name. I knew he would recognize the precision and the ruthless organization. He would know exactly who had done this. That evening, thunder started rolling over the hills. It was the first rain since I was forced out. I poured myself a drink and watched the city lights blur through the window. Kendall called, her voice low. "Do you think he'll confront her?" "I think he'll finally see her clearly," I said. "And then what?" I let the silence respond, knowing it would finish the story. Outside, lightning flashed. The storm didn't scare me for the first time in years. It sounded like justice was getting ready. He arrived 2 nights later. The rain was heavy, turning the streets slick. I was sitting at my desk when I heard frantic pounding on my apartment door. I opened it. My father stood there, drenched and shaking, holding the black envelope. His tie was loose. His eyes were red and empty. He looked human, not like an empire builder. "Sylvie," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What is this?" I didn't step aside right away. I let him walk past, leaving wet footprints. He threw the envelope onto my table. The papers were damp, but the facts were still visible. Photos, receipts, messages. My mother's face caught mid-laugh, Bryce's hand on her waist. "Tell me this isn't real," he pleaded. It was a request, not a demand. I looked him straight on. "You told me to be honest. Here is the truth." He sank into the chair, staring at the pages, hoping they would change. "She wouldn't. After everything I did for her, after everything you did to me," I finished. He looked up quickly. I saw a flicker of shame, still mixed with his pride. "You shouldn't have gone through my business accounts. You shouldn't have thrown me out of your own house." The silence afterward was deafening. He gripped his hair, trying to hold himself together. "Why send this to me? Why now?" I leaned back. "Because you needed to see who you were protecting. You thought I was the problem. The problem was right next to you." He stared for a moment. "You wanted to ruin her." I shook my head. "No, I just stopped shielding her. That's what you did to me." Lightning lit up his broken reflection in the window. He picked up the last picture, my mother's hand on Bryce's arm outside the hotel. His hand shook the paper. "She was everything I had left," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "You had me. You just rejected me." He visibly broke. He covered his face, making a sound that was pure pain. The Sterling Empire was falling, and I had simply given him the evidence. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I answered after a pause. He frowned. "Nothing. I wanted you to understand how it feels to lose what you thought was permanently yours." He stood quickly, anger surfacing. "You think this makes you better. You think this cruelty is justice." I held his stare. "No, Dad, this truth is justice. The cruelty started with you." He looked at me intently, breathing hard. He took the folder and left without a word. I didn't stop him. I watched him disappear down the hall until the elevator closed. The apartment was quiet except for the rain. I expected to feel triumphant, but I didn't. I just knew what came next. 3 weeks later, he called. His voice was subdued, fragile. "The house is empty," he said. "She left. Bryce emptied the accounts. The board is collapsing. I can't fix it." He hesitated. "Come home, Sylvie, please, I need help." I let the pause linger. Power comes from patience. "I don't live there anymore, Dad." He exhaled. "I know, but we are family. We can rebuild." "You already did that," I reminded him. "You rebuilt without me." He didn't reply. I heard his shallow breathing. I pictured him alone at that massive dining table, surrounded by his ghosts. After the call, I went to my laptop. I transferred $1 from my company to his account. The memo read, "For the man who taught me how to lose everything." I kept his number unblocked. He never called again. Weeks passed. Sterling Group's crash was quick. Investors sued. My father's name faded from business news and became mere gossip. My mother was briefly seen leaving the city with one suitcase. Bryce's name vanished like smoke. One night I drove back to Summit Ridge. The gates were broken and open. Weeds grew on the brick. The house was dark and empty. I stood there as the rain fell, waiting to feel something: anger, victory, sorrow. I felt only detachment. The girl they kicked out was finally gone. Only a woman they never bothered to know remained, a woman who knew silence was louder than forgiveness. I drove toward the city. The storm was clearing. I realized revenge was not the goal. Freedom was. I never heard from them again. The silence that haunted me now felt like peace. Sterling Group dissolved. Its logo was taken down like a name scraped off a tombstone. Reporters called, but I had nothing to say. The story was over. Kendall visited with wine. We talked about my new clients, future travel, and the life that was finally mine. I wasn't reacting to them anymore. I sometimes drive past that hill, not to look back, but to mark my progress. The house stands dark. I don't stop. They ejected me to protect a lie. I built my life on their absence. Justice came not from revenge, but from walking away. When rain hits my window, I remember my father's last look, when he understood that silence can burn more fiercely than words. I used to want their apology, their approval. Now I feel free. People say revenge changes you. Maybe. But for me, it was just about proving I could thrive without the people who swore I couldn't. If you have been underestimated, remember this: the best comeback is living well. If this connected with you, like and comment where you are watching from. Your stories matter. The next one is deeper.